they still want to ask before we go? Yes, sir.
Chris, I know you touched very shortly on the issues of when working with a student. You don't want to squash the limitations and the things that they see in Scripture. Could you speak a little, or any of you speak a little bit to how you can respond to a student who has come up with an interpretation that is actually fairly outside the realm of what that passage could mean and could actually lead into issues later on, and how you can respond to them in a way that's loving?
The first thing I would probably do is say, where in the passage do you see that? And you may discover that they're actually using hallucinogenic drugs as they're reading the passage. But I just have to tell you, the amount of stuff I've learned from having kids see something in the passage I didn't see it's one of the things that keeps me involved in youth ministry. There's a lot more there than I've seen. But I mean, if they decide, something that's really, really, really off the wall, I would simply, first I would ask the question, where do you see that? And second, to say, I'm not sure that what you're seeing is actually in the text. But how would you guys respond to that?
I think that's a good approach. I think that's a good brief approach to the problem. So,
No. I'm Australian, so I'm blunt. I'd say no, that's not right. But I'm completely with Wiz. What you keep pushing them back to the text. Okay, how did you get that? Why did you get that? Does it fit with the rest of the text? And it can be a really helpful thing to push them to go, oh yeah, no, that really wasn't there. And just.
I think you can also push them to say, well, maybe if you convince me on that, why don't you sort of go back this week and see where else in the Bible you can find that? Because it has a context.
Yes,
I think that's also
and what comes to my mind is we use Scripture to interpret Scripture.
Right.
Yes.
So there's lots of phrases and references and so forth in the New Testament that are rooted in the Old Testament, and if you draw a teenager's attention to what it is in the Old Testament, all of a sudden just makes it crystal clear. Just sort of, that does have a very specific meaning.
Yeah, just one more brief thing. The place where I find that happening the most often is when I'm talking to people who are like in 8th grade and they haven't completely made the shift into formal or abstract thinking. Like the thing about the house, they may not get that that's an allegorical language. So anyway.
other questions? Okay, now I want you to put. Okay, good. Go.
Julie, in your speech, like on your handout, you had two things. Like one, what do you do if they don't talk enough, and what do you do if they talk too much? But you didn't really touch on what you do if they talk too much. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, and you know what? Especially when you've got more than one girl. That's more of an issue. And so, it really is. I'm just saying the facts. And so giving them the chance to share early on often helps that. So, especially when they know when they're meeting with you, they know you're going to ask them how their day is. They know you're going to ask how their week is. So there's this sense where they get all that out at the beginning. And it's really good for them to be able to get it all out. And then once we've got it all out, later on they might say, "Oh, I've got something else." I said, "Well, you know what? We're going to focus on studying the scriptures now. We'll have some time afterwards. We can talk about some other stuff. But for a lot of, depending on the age as well, pulling them back to what you're actually talking about takes a little bit of effort and to be disciplined to say, okay, guys, we've talked about these things, but the sharing for girls if they talk too much is really important. You've got to give them the opportunity to get it out. But when you get into a routine of you're doing these things, they know that there's going to be a time when that stops. So I have one girl, she would come to the chaplain's office every day if I let her, and just talk the entire time. And we would meet for Bible study, and sometimes she would say, "Can we just talk?" And you know, and to be honest, sometimes she actually needed that. There are times when she really did need a lot of talk time, and it was okay, you know, every now and again to say, let's have just a talk time today because she really needed it. So is that helpful?
So I just want to throw in my trick for doing that, which is a lot less thoughtful. Basically, if I've got somebody that talks a lot, I'll often ask them outside of the meeting, is it okay if sometimes I ask you to stop in the interest of time? And almost always people say, yeah. And then I basically get their permission to tell them to shut up. That has always helped me. So, yes, sir.
This might be on a case-by-case basis, but I mean, how do you know how many you can help at one time?
Do you want to aim that at somebody?
Whoever. would
Do you
like
mean
to.
size of group, or do you mean number of people
Number
throughout
of
the week?
people, mostly?
Yeah.
Technically, I would give two different answers to this. One of them is small group theorists say the largest number of people you can have and still have a small group is 15. However, there's a lot of research out there in youth ministry that says once you get more than a 5-to-1 ratio, you need to add another leader.
Okay.
You know, and it's going to depend on your personality type as well. So an introvert is going to need less face-to-face time with someone, and there's an extrovert who just wants to fill every waking hour face-to-face. For me, if I'm meeting one-to-one, the maximum in one day I can do is 3, just because by the end of that, I've got nothing left to give to the fourth person. I don't want to listen to what they did today. I don't want to, you know, I'm not interested at all, and it's doing a disservice to them when I push myself too much. But the average person who's working full-time and might have a family, I'd say one person. If you can find one person right now and you meet with them for an hour and a half, you start there. But you might find, you know what, I love this so much, I'm going to reduce my work hours, and I'm going to find another one. And so my advice would start with one and see how you go. But you don't want to suddenly say, you know, 10 people, you know, 2 a day, you know, midweek, and in the end you're not going to help them because you're just going to burn out.
It's also not uncommon for somebody who's really benefiting from that relationship, who's got a couple of close friends that they'd like to draw into it, that it becomes, you know, you meeting with 3 guys, 4 guys, something like that instead, and that's all of a sudden you're discipling several at once, which is very time effective.
Which, to be honest, I think is one of the ideals. Is if it from 1 it grows to 2 and 3, and you have a little a support group.
Anybody else? Oh, Stephen. So, do you guys have any suggestions about other Bible study resources? Anybody on the panel?
Oh, like me, maybe?
Oh,
I have a couple in my hand.
Oh,
There's on your sheet there, one of your handouts. We mentioned a couple of books, and I want to just talk about them ever so briefly because I brought them for that purpose. One of them is Dig Deeper. You can get this off Amazon. It's cheap. I've been handing this off to teenagers to read that are student leaders in our diocese, and they love it. They find it so helpful and so readable. It reads like a conversation, a lighthearted, fun conversation, and yet covers some real in-depth tools for studying the Bible. And it's not just limited to teenagers. Another one on that sheet is Bible Overview. It's obviously a bigger book, but it's still not some mammoth sort of like, I can't get through this. But this actually takes you through the different genres of Scripture, the different types of reading. How do you read poetry as opposed to reading the Gospels or reading the biblical narratives of the Old Testament? And then even breaking it down to how do we understand the different books of the Bible in terms of what are the themes and what are the big ideas that are in that. Both of these are Anglican written. A lot of people don't realize there's some great Bible study resources that have been produced by Anglicans Another one that I want to commend to you because of what we're teaching here in terms of one-on-one is a little book called One-to-One Bible Reading. It's small, obviously, and it has actually sample one-to-one Bible stuff to do with people that are there's some that's in here, and there's, if you go to the website that's on the book, you can actually download a bunch of materials as well, and it'll walk you through how do you do an evangelistic one-to-one Bible reading of the Gospel of Mark with a teenager or adult or whatever. How do you do Old Testament one-to-one? How do you do New Testament? Different types of portions of the Bible. Really simple, really straightforward. It's not a book written about youth. It's a book just written about how does one person read the Bible with another person in a meaningful sort of discipling way. And this book was rooted off of this. This one's, I don't know what denomination this guy's from. It's Holy Trinity Church in Chicago. But he wrote that in response to this book, which is Anglican sourced as well, comes from Sydney, Australia, The Trellis and the Vine, which the guys who wrote this basically wanted to see people in churches reading the Bible with other people in their churches. And that's where a lot of what we're putting forward, this is totally about what a lot of what we're putting forward is. And in our sort of caveat when we say, hey, this is great stuff, one-to-one Bible reading, is we want you to sit down and read the Bible with a teenager and disciple them that way, but we're not limiting ourselves just to one-to-one, because it may be 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, that sort of thing.
Who are the
But-
authors on those last two?
The one-to-one Bible reading is David Helm, Helm. Again, all of these are Amazon available. The Trellis and the Vine is Colin Marshall and Tony Payne. And if you want to, when we're done here, if you want to come up and take a look at these, I didn't put them on the back table because I knew they'd disappear. So the Trellis and the Vine, Colin Marshall and Tony Payne. And the other, if I might plug one other book that's not listed anywhere, but a friend of mine wrote this. It's called Can I Really Trust the Bible? It's written by an Anglican, again, in London, who works with Christianity Explored Ministries, and which came out of All Souls Langham Place in London, big church that John Stott was the rector of for many, many years. And he wrote this great little book on how we logically and how we can get our heads around trusting the Bible, how the Bible's trustworthy. Really, really small. And he's got a great, if you go to YouTube and find the advert for this, it's really hilarious. Anyway, Barry Cooper. Barry Cooper, Can I Really Trust the Bible? Short little, very readable book on the validity and sufficiency, etc. of Scripture.
Anyone else have any resources that they want to? Okay, any other questions? Wait,
There's
questions?
some really good resources at SALT Resources. He's someone that writes Bible studies or things for kids who are keeping young life. My First 30 Quiet Times. There's a Lenten devotional. And his stuff really challenges the kids to go deeper. And they all pretty much focus on the person of Christ.
Okay, and it's SALT?
SALT Resources.
Okay.
They're written by Ty Salzgiver.
Okay.
And they're very inexpensive. You can get them for a whole group of kids for a very reasonable price.
Excellent, excellent. Any last questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I missed the book right after Dig Deeper. Which one?
Bible overview. It's on the handout.
Okay, that's one.
Yep. The other thing maybe I should mention, the one-to-one, there's several publishers that have picked up on this and really keen on providing resources for doing this. Two of them, Anglican again, or a lot of Anglicans on their staff, Matthias Media and the Good Book Company. They both have branches in the U.S. They're both based elsewhere, but one's from London, one's from Australia. They both have branches in the U.S., and they both have been writing materials for doing one-to-one, some of that material is actually how an adult male can do a one-to-one Bible study with a male student, and a woman can do with a girl, that sort of thing. Just resource books that are specifically written for one-to-one Bible study.
Okay, any other last questions? Then we are ending the panel.